Welcome officially to Better Book Covers, Make the Right Impression with Damon Freeman and Jule Kucera. Before we get started, I want to thank this month's sponsor. I always have a sponsor every month for both my free newsletter as well as these free sessions. This month's sponsor is WorldShift, the Speculative Fiction Writer Summit. It is a free online event that's going to be held later this month from August 20th to 23rd. And if you follow the link that you see on the slide, you can go and find out more information and register. So thank you to WorldShift. And now, without further ado, I want to introduce who I have with me today. First, Damon Freeman. He is the founder of the book design firm Damon Za. He has spent nearly 2 decades in the design and advertising, or he did spend 18 years in the design and advertising industries, and he started book cover design work in 2011. And I've known about his work for a very long time. Damon, I can't remember when I first learned about your design work, but when I was helping clients with self-publishing, yours was the firm I went to help the author get a great looking cover for a literary novel. And it was just fantastic. And so he's been on my resource list at my site for years and years. Jule Kucera, some of you may recognize. We've done some sessions together about storytelling. She does something called Story Jewels. If you go to my YouTube channel, you'll find those sessions that we've done together. She spent a career working at Fortune 150 companies, and she now writes and publishes full time. And of course, she's also working as a teacher and a coach. And she also used Damon's design company for her book cover, which she's going to be talking about a little bit later. Now, before we get underway, I just wanted to make a few introductory comments about the importance of book cover design. I imagine you are all on the same page with me today. No pun intended. But one of the things that really woke me up to how book cover design affects reader engagement and sales was this case study in 2017. And of course, I've spent 15 years in traditional publishing. I spent a lot of time in cover meetings. I was already sold on the importance of covers. But this particular case study was just so strong in showing how designing a cover to meet the reader and their expectations of the genre or category just has a really significant effect on sales. I'm going to put a link to this case study in the chat as soon as I hand things off to Jule. But you're going to see some really stellar discussion here of why covers matter so much. In particular, they mention how a redesign of this hard science fiction book ended up tripling sales just by having a better cover that spoke to readers about what they were going to find inside. And I think it's pretty obvious. The cover on the left, which was the original cover, has a more literary and cerebral feel, quite literally. They put a kind of a brain on the cover. But it's really more of a hard science fiction thriller, and you don't get that feeling from the left-hand cover. It does come through, however, on the redesigned cover on the right, which, as I said, this increased their sales, it tripled their sales, and without them even having to do anything else. So, the other thing I want to mention as a resource, and I'll put this link into the chat, is that if you're not sure what your readers are expecting out of covers in your genre, if you can, of course, do that research yourself by simply going to online retailers like Amazon and looking at the top 100 or top 500 sellers, you're definitely going to see themes and patterns emerge. There's also a site called Klytics that does reports on specific genres, and those reports have a discussion of cover designs that are prevalent in the best-selling titles. And you can see that Alex Newton, who runs Klytics, he breaks it down by the tropes and the design themes that you see on the cover. So in the romantic comedy category, he found that the top 500, out of those top 500, 41% were flat vector style covers, 31% featured a sexy guy, and then you see the others are a smaller percentage of those top 500. So you can get up to speed very quickly on what covers are appropriate for your category, and you, of course, can just research it on your own as well. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I don't want to burn up too much time since I think you all know how important covers are. Jule, I'm going to hand things over to you so you can talk about your cover design journey and what happened.
Okay, I will do that. Um, I want to say that I am sharing these slides and you can have them if you would like. Um, Jane can put the link in the chat or I can later. But the main thing is I created this deck to be useful to you when you go to create your cover. So these are things that I've learned along the way. I'm not going to read everything on the slides. It's way too much information, but there are some lessons learned here that I think will be helpful. First one is know your purpose. If you're just in for artistic expression, you get a lot of leeway with your cover. You could do what you want. But most of us want to sell books. And what that means is that we will then make decisions for our cover that may be in conflict with our personal decision because we might like something better, but a different cover might sell better. Know what's possible. It depends on how you're publishing. And I have a true story. A writer friend of mine knew she was going to either self-publish or go with a hybrid publisher. And she spent a lot of time with designers and so time and money for months. And then she decided to go with a hybrid publisher. And she had by that point gotten to a cover she loved. And she brought them the cover and she said, look, here's my cover. I love it. And they said, thank you very much, but we only work with covers that we design in-house. So that cover had to be thrown away. Your amount of input will vary depending on how you are publishing. Know what matters to you. If you can't have everything you want, what do you most care about? For me, when it comes to illustration, I want it not to conflict with the text. And that started when I was a kid, if I read a story where the illustration didn't match. This is an illustration not from a cover, but it makes the point. It's a part of the story where the girl is fighting against the words, and the original illustration is on the left. And I did not like that she does not appear to be fighting. She appears to be asleep. And also, I did not like the splay of her legs. So that was changed in the revisions. Select your cover source if you get to. One option is I'll do it myself, and I hope if you're thinking that today's session will help you see alternatives. Another is to hire an artist or a designer, and I learned the hard way if somebody says they're an artist, a book cover artist, that doesn't mean they're a cover designer. It means that they've created illustrations that have been used on books, and they may or may not know what they need to know to create the right cover. They might not even know size specifications. They can get things wrong. Or you can, yes, 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 use a book cover expert such as Damon's organization, Damon Zaw. There are others. And how I found Damon Zaw was they kept getting awarded on the book designer book on a book cover competition. When you decide to work with someone, do what you're asked. They will most likely ask you to complete a questionnaire, a design brief. Take your time with it. It is your first opportunity to communicate with your designer. If you noodle with some artwork, send it over. They might use it, they might not, but it helps them understand where you're coming from. And then when you get something back, prepare your mindset. You may not realize it, but you have expectations about what this cover is going to look like. And I can pretty much guarantee that whatever you first open, it's not going to look like you expect. It's going to be different. So just sit down, set your expectations aside, and take a look at what you've received. Then review your cover. And it's time to deal in facts, not feelings. And I have a list here, but I have slides that make the points. So let's just go to those. First question is, does it communicate the genre? What we saw from Jane, that Bean cover, the first one conveyed literary fiction, literary something. And the second one fit it. These are two covers from same author. They're both horror stories, but one book has outsold the other. And I'm thinking it's because the one looks like an IKEA catalog. It doesn't look all that horrific. The images in the background of the face and the hands are too easy to miss. Does it meet the genre convention? So I don't have my chat set up, so I'm just going to have to depend on Jane here. I'm going to ask a question and you tell me which cover you think that fits. So which cover do you think is a delightful contemporary rom-com? One, two, or three? Okay.
I'm watching the chat for you.
Yay.
Everyone says two. Everyone.
Two.
No
Which
mistake.
one, which one features steamy sex? What do we got?
Mostly ones, some threes.
Which is completely appropriate because steamy sex is in both of those. Which one is most likely to have been self-published?
Lots of ones.
Yeah. And isn't that interesting that you can tell? I don't know if Damon will probably tell us later, unless he wants to comment now, but there's a reason why we look at one and go, something's not quite right. All right, but we don't want to be trendy. Right now, this is the current trend. The historic painting with the neon font, sans serif, and after a while, they all start to look the same. So you want to be in the genre, but not trendy. That's hard to do. And is it legible or functional? Sweet Baby Lover, the original cover is on the left, had a few problems. One is people didn't know whether the title was Sweet Baby Love or Lover. I thought that disappearing R was clever, but anyway, it would cause confusion. And then, is it a novel or a memoir? You can't tell. But on the redesigned cover, you can tell the title of the book and you can tell that it's a memoir, thanks to Damon Zock. The reason I redesigned the cover was because I got a notice from Amazon. The book was published in 2014. I got the notice in 2023. We will no longer sell your book. It no longer meets our print. It doesn't meet our current print standards. I'm like, what? You've been selling it for almost 10 years. What's the problem? The slide deck on the very last slide, I tell you what the problem is, but it's something very simple. But this person who was an illustrator, not a cover designer, missed it. Does it work as a thumbnail? We so often look at our cover in full screen, the bigger screen we've got, but most people, the first time they encounter our cover, if they're looking online, are going to see it as a thumbnail, whether that's on a book site or an Audible. And you can see even with these covers that there are some that work better than others as thumbnails. So look at your cover shrunk. And then does it work in life? This large print edition, I didn't have a sense of just how big the spine was going to be. So I folded it to dimensions because I wanted to know if the elderly hand that I was designing it for could hold it. Does it meet good design criteria? This came through my email box within the last couple of weeks. The one on the left came through first. And I remember thinking, interesting choice about font size for the authors. And then when the second one came through, I saw, okay, they've changed that. And they also did some other changes, which I won't talk about. But I will recommend this book. It's the Non-Designer's Design book by Robin Williams. The pictures of her first edition. It's now in the fourth edition. But she has different principles, and they can help you look at covers or other designs. They can give you a language for looking at them. They can also give you a language for speaking with your designer about them. This is a principle of alignment, which I'm skipping. But then when you go discuss with your cover designer, be kind, ask questions, listen, recognize that they want the same thing you want. They want a great cover, and treat them the way you would treat be like a beta reader. So when you ask a beta reader for feedback, you want to know places that were confusing or they seemed off, but you don't want them to tell you the solution. Do the same thing with your cover designer. Tell them if the spine is hard to read or something like that. And you might have ideas about how to fix that, but leave it open-ended. Let them decide whether to make it larger or darker, or change the background, because they have a whole toolkit of things that they know to do, and we just don't know. So that's from here on, the deck goes into the appendix, and it is 4 versions of feedback from me to the designer. And you'll see that it's very open-ended, and it's, this doesn't work, I don't see this, and how should we do that? But that's the end of my sharing.
Oh, well, before you end entirely, I would love for you to just discuss a little bit,
Okay.
like the high points of that collaboration that you had with Damon, and maybe Damon can jump into if he feels moved to do so. Just at how, the give and take, or yeah, and how and any subtle changes that occurred as you made progress.
The changes were, it was a really nice relationship. It was strange because I'm conversing with a person that I don't know, right? So it's all back and forth and online. But I liked the way I could say, for my first reaction, my first thing I said was, I love this. I love the cover, because you certainly get the sense of loss from the new cover, which wasn't clear in the original one. Yes, it's a grief memoir, but it was very kind back and forth. And I appreciated the way sometimes I would say, what about this? Or, could this solve it or this solve it? And the one that comes to mind is, how do we label the large print? And I'm trying to figure out where the circle goes, because I'm used to seeing the circle of large print edition. And the designer decided, no, let's put it as like a triangle in the upper corner. And I thought, oh, well, of course, what a great solution. So it was very easy and nice. And I also remember liking the input form, that I thought that form was really getting at not just Well, it gets at, like Damon was saying before, the emotions, the feel, not just the facts. Did that help answer, Jane?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, thank you. So I'm going to talk briefly about what happened with my book's cover. Now, this is going back to the first edition, and my editor sent me this, and I was very unhappy. Only Mark could probably tell you the depths of my unhappiness with this cover. I felt like I was being put in a prison, and that the readers too would be feel like the business of being a writer was like being put in a prison. And but I couldn't go to my editor or to my publisher. It's a university press, University of Chicago, and say, I hate this. I feel imprisoned. What I did was write an email that said, part of the core message of this book is that business is creative. There are imaginative components to this. It's not this thing that's going to, you know, trap you into activities or into a life that you can't sustain or that you're going to dislike. And I also emphasized how organic it was, the organic nature of things like platform building or finding your way to a sustainable business model. It is not a series of straight lines and steps and moving from level to level or from box to box. It is much more textured and interesting than that. And so I felt like these hard edges and rules were just antithetical to the message of the book. So that's how I expressed it. Later, I'm happy to say that my editor told me that it was one of the most effective messages they've received where an author disagreed with the cover without saying, I hate this, change it. And I ended up getting this cover for the first edition. I was not prescriptive with them about what to do, kind of as Jule mentioned. If you can simply talk about what you're trying to achieve, and you can let the designer figure out how to achieve that with the tools that they have. I was not a fan of this color, I have to say, but I let it go. Like it was a hard enough process, and I just let that part go. Then when the second edition came out this spring, I initially thought they were going to do an entire redesign, but they didn't. They decided they wanted to stick with the core concept, and I was very grateful they chose what I considered to be a better color. They took out the icons, which is fine. My name got bigger and put on top, which is like I, the joke that we had when I worked at the traditional publisher is that every author makes a comment about how their name should be bigger and maybe put on top. I did not ask for that, but they went ahead and did it. So I was pretty happy with this outcome. All right, I'm going to stop there and I'll turn things over to Damon.
Thank you very much. That was great. Firstly, Jule, that advice you just gave was so good. I wish I could give that exact same advice to every author because it was just perfect, 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 perfect. Really, that was amazing. Um, and thank you, Jane, for introducing me and for everything, and obviously for everything that you do, right, for authors. That you do so much. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we will appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen. All right, so the reason we're here, obviously, is everybody wants their book to succeed. And other than writing the book well, I guess after you've written the book and you had it properly edited and proofread and all of those kinds of things, the cover is one of the things that you have a lot of control over, right? So it's a powerful tool, but it's easy to get it wrong. So what I'm going to show you is many examples of how certain covers are not quite getting it right. And I don't want to criticize these covers for the sake of it, but to highlight real fixable issues that affect reader perception and, very importantly, sales. So some authors have submitted covers for this, and that's what we'll be looking at. But at the end, I'm going to try to show you exactly what to do and what to avoid. Right, so your book should already look like a bestseller, right? So readers want to read good books, right? Obviously. So how do they know your book is any good? They're presented with a ton of thumbnails with very, very small images of your book. And why should they click on yours? It needs to look like it's good, right? It needs to look like it's already a bestseller. Just as we're told to dress for the job we want, your book should already look like a bestseller. It already should look like it's worth clicking on and worth spending money on. So what does it actually mean? It should look like actual bestsellers within your genre, right? It should remind readers, potential readers, of other books they've read and enjoyed, which are probably the bestsellers within your genre. After all, that's why they're bestsellers. People read them and enjoyed them. So if your book looks like those books that they enjoyed, subconsciously they'll think that they'll probably enjoy your book as well. So they'll click on it, right? That's step one. Now that's like a hot lead in sales. So at this point, if you want them to buy your book, then you need to sell them your book, right? With your description or your blurb or whatever it might be. Now they're interested. And now that is step two, is your Amazon page or the blurb on the back of the book. But with this, I guess we're focusing just on step one. Right. Most self-published books look self-published. And that's bad, right? Because most bestsellers, not all, are traditionally published, right? So it's important that your book doesn't look self-published. Now, how do you make your book look traditionally published? And the easiest way to do it, and I think is the most effective way, is to copy them. Right, I'm sure you've noticed that many of those most popular books within a genre look similar. It's just like that example you gave of the romance covers where they all have those flat graphics on them, 41%. It wasn't always like that, right? It's a new trend, right? But that's what traditional publishers do. I know Jule said, don't get too trendy, but the reality is that's what the traditional publishers do, and there's a reason why they do them. That's how we're briefed by those traditional publishers. We're given examples of other popular books within a genre, and they say, make it look like these, or at least make it fit in with these, right? So I feel like, yeah, that's an important note. It needs to look like a traditionally published bestseller within your genre, right? Very important, within your genre. At Jule, you also touched on it earlier, that it doesn't help if your book looks like it belongs in a different genre, because, readers are finding your book in the beginning looking at the genre, not at the cover in isolation. Right, so we're going to go through some of these examples. Now, some of the feedback will probably come across as harsh, and I don't intend to be that. I'm not trying to be unkind, but I am trying to be completely and ruthlessly honest. Like I want these books to be successful, and for the most part, when I get provided, so I do cover reviews often, and when I get provided the covers to review, most of them are not very good. So it's not uncommon. You don't have to feel, oh no, my cover is terrible. But it's many covers in the beginning could be improved substantially, and that's what hopefully I'm going to try and show you. So the first thing I'm going to look at is, imagine you're a reader looking for a mystery cover, and you're presented with cover. You can click on any of these, right? And you're going to choose where to spend your money. So where are you going to spend your money on those books, right? At this point, you don't really know anything. You might recognize some of the authors, but you might not. So that's where you're presented with options in the beginning. So for this one, we're going to be looking at this cover, right? So this was one of the covers that was submitted for feedback, right? So what is quite common, you see this quite often, you've kind of got a generic clip art silhouette on the left side there. It looks like clip art, right? It has that kind of look to it. It doesn't have depth. It's typography is all over the place. There's quite an interesting background image of that shipwreck, which could have potential, but it doesn't gel with anything else really. There's that strange white mark in the top left corner. I was trying to figure it out if it's a UFO or I don't know what it is. The typography is all over the place. The fonts used, which I'll touch on, but the fonts used, they kind of generic looking. They mixed that bottom typography, A Vision of Violence, has got two different fonts that make up the title, but they're so similar to each other. They're not very, very different, right? They're so similar to each other that it almost looks like one is a mistake. The layout is a bit all over the place. And the genre is not very clear, right? So if you go back and you look at the ones that people would be comparing that cover to, you can immediately see that it just doesn't fit in. And if somebody's choosing where they're going to spend their money, they're unlikely to click on the book in the middle that is sort of not quite as good as those others. Here's another example. This one's epic fantasy. Again, readers are comparing your cover to other books, right, within that genre. And again, this one is lacking, right? It's very messy. Everything blends together. You can't really see what's going on. There isn't a clear focal point that draws you in. There's not enough contrast. There's not enough separation within the image to see what's what. The text gets lost against the background. And the font choices are not professional. Here's another example. Somebody wants to read a book on self-improvement. Some of these are not, these genres I haven't focused down really into the subgenres, but I just wanted to give you an indication of sort of the broader genres. So again, where will I spend my money on self-improvement, right? This was the one that was submitted. It's kind of generic looking. There's no color. It's an interesting and unusual title and subtitle, but it's lost because the design is boring, right? There's nothing here that attracts interest, and especially at thumbnail, it's just too plain, right? If you're looking at the trends, look at the bright colors, the contrast. The next one. So this one over here, these are memoirs, right? All of those. So they're a collection of memoirs. This one over here, I actually wasn't sure of the genre, right? So I was trying to look at it. I was trying to understand, the day Dancer died. I'm guessing that's Santa Claus in the left corner. Maybe it's literary fiction. I don't know. But but that's kind of part of the problem, right? How do we know what this is, right? It's just unclear. The title is a bit cramped in the top. The color is forgettable, black and pink. It's just easy to miss the thumbnail. And the author name, which is very, very small and tucked away, is a very, very common self-publishing error. To have an author name that is too insignificant, right? We'll get to that in a second. Here's another example. Science fiction. Colors are interesting, right? Good contrast. But again, when you're looking at science fiction, where are you going to spend your money out of those covers where that you're looking at the same time? So these fonts are distorted, right? Typography, if you look at fonts are designed to be used in a very particular way without distortion, right? Sometimes you think, it doesn't quite fit, or it's not quite right. I need to make it a bit taller, right? Or I need to make it a bit wider. But in distorting that font, you're making it look like it's wrong, right? So the immediate impression that you're giving is a mistake on this cover. That Photoshop blending is not right. There are, bits of pixelation in the background. The composition is off. So which is great that there's a large title, which is good. The author name size is good, but there's a big empty space in the middle of that cover, which it just looks like there should be something there, something missing there. This is another one, again, comparing that middle cover, which is the one that was submitted with the others around it. If you just look at the color and the contrast and the simplicity of those covers compared to the one in the middle, something, again, that we get. There's too much going on in this cover, too much competition between the typography and the image, and there's no text hierarchy. Everything has equal weight. I thought this was quite interesting as well, that the cover art attribution is on the front cover as well. That's not something that you see. That's not correct.
maybe I'll make a quick comment on that one, just because it reminds me of like the first thing I got nailed on in school because I took some design classes eons ago. And I was always criticized for doing what was the professor called a t-shirt design. The t-shirt design was an image that takes up like most of the real estate, and then you just lay the text right on top of it. Done. And
Yeah,
that's what this reminds me of.
yeah, yeah. Here's another one. Uh, Women's fiction, right? All this is women's friendship fictions, but so it's a little bit different. But I was trying to find some different kinds of examples. So again, this cover has got the right idea, right? It's got good color, it's got good contrast, but there are balance issues in the typography and the image. The bottom half is quite a lot going on. It's quite busy, but the top half just has the blue title and a blue background, and it's too small, right? It's too empty. So it's just a balance issue here. I mean, there are other small bits and pieces. You know, that the name at the bottom, Carol Wolf, the author's name, is it's in this rectangular orange space, but it's not in the middle of that rectangular orange space, right? It's too much, it's too close to the top. So although you want to have balance, and you don't want the author name too close to the edge of the cover, you've also got to balance it against the other elements in the cover. You know, everything has to work together. This was an interesting cover. I didn't put it. Oh, I'll show you why. So this is quite an interesting cover. The genre is not super clear, but having looked up this book and sort of read a little bit more about it, I do understand it. So it's got quite an interesting style with that sort of sketched. I don't know what you want to call it, sort of a messy sketch, although it's a little bit too dark in my opinion. The typography needs some work, although again, not bad. However, to me, this still looks self-published because of the typography, right? That's probably the main reason. So I wanted to give these other examples. Now, what I also would like to say about these examples is I don't know if they're self-published or traditionally published, right? Many of them. I mean, some of them I do, but often I don't. But that's the point, right? The point is that I need to think. I think they might be traditionally published, right? And I'm more likely to click on them because I think that. So the comparison there, I just wanted to show you the difference in typography and on the others, especially in the size and clarity of those. Okay, these are just other examples that I thought were actually pretty good. So they're not everything that was submitted was terrible, you know. So these are pretty good. The Ghostwriter, The Haunting of Lake Lucy. You know, I'm guessing that's sort of a cozy supernatural mystery. That's what it looks like, and I think that's pretty good. You know, as a cover, the bright colors, good contrast, good text size. That Wild Woman's workbook is quite interesting, but it definitely looks more like a academic book or a textbook than a commercial nonfiction or writing help book. So again, that just depends a little bit on the target market and really what you're trying to achieve, and potentially how big your audience already is, because you can take a lot more chances when a lot of people already know who you are. You can do sort of things that maybe are not quite as commercially strong as would be needed. This was another example that was sent as two separate covers, or sorry, as in one file. So I imagine that the first one on the left, version A, was an earlier version of this cover, and version B was a later version of the cover. But I thought it was quite good to show you, just as you did, Jane, sort of before and after images. Now, I don't know what's happened with the sales before and after. I don't know any of those things, but I do know that there were the issues with the version A cover are improved in the version B cover, which is really a lot of it's around the typography and the size of the author name, and how elements of that second cover can be used for branding, specifically around the font choices and the layout for additional books. All right, so putting that all together, these are the examples, right? So these were the examples that we used for those covers without the ones that were submitted. And I really wanted to show you the high contrast and high color of all of these images. contrast and color, those are the things that catch the eye, right? It's very important to have not just color and not just contrast, but that combination of both. Look at the author name size, even the ones where it's pretty small. D.K. Holmberg here and The Queen's Blade, Annette Chavez Macias, I don't know how to pronounce it, for When We Were Widows on the right there. They're not tiny, right? They're not tiny. They still have presence on the cover, and there's still balance on the cover. They're not hidden away because the author thinks they're insignificant or whatever it might be. It's important that your book already looks like a bestseller, because you need to show confidence in your book so that the readers also feel confidence in buying your book, right? They want to feel that they're buying a book that's as good as it could possibly be. And if you're not portraying that in the cover and in the size of your name, then readers see that and feel it. The title placement, very, very often authors are sent through covers for review where the title's right at the top and the author name right at the bottom. But in reality, for the top book covers, that's not how it works. For the most part, the covers are the titles are close to the center of the cover. Or if it's a very well-known author, the author's name might be in the center of the cover, right? But it's not tucked in right at the top with an image in the middle and the author name right at the bottom. That is not something that happens. Although people believe it is, I know that's the same thing, Jane, like you were taught in school on how to do things, but that's not really how the cover should look. These are examples of nonfiction over here. Again, note the high contrast, high color, size of the author name is bigger, or I say big. It's not tiny. Simple is better for the most part for nonfiction. And in nonfiction, typography, I believe, is more important than the image, right? To give that professional feel. Right, so this is important. Readers are comparing your cover against traditionally published bestsellers, and you should as well. Don't look at your cover in isolation. Don't compare your cover to other self-published covers. You need to compare your cover to the books other people are currently spending the readers are currently spending their money on. Because a self-published book is often perceived to be of lower quality than a traditionally published book, right? Whether or not that's true, your book should not look self-published. You don't need to put the whole story on the front cover, right? You don't need an important scene on the front cover. The only job of your cover is to get the click or to get people to pick it up and turn it over. Then your description needs to sell it. So that's super important because we get that all the time, where they give us a very descriptive thing that's happening in the book or whatever it might be, and we can try to do that, but none of that really matters because it is often meaningless, right? You're kind of showing something that happens in the book, but like I've never read your book. I don't know what's in your book. The reader doesn't know what's that. Maybe that's in your book, but that doesn't mean I'm going to click on your book because of that specific thing. That's not the thing that's going to make me click, right? What's going to make me click is that feeling, this looks like a book that I might like because it looks like other books I like, right? It looks at, there's a reason why suspense thriller have the silhouetted man running through the city streets, all of them, because that looks like successful books within the genre of books that they like. So it doesn't need to be a literal part of the story. It just needs to get that click. And that requires color, good contrast, strong typography, and to remind the reader that it looks just like the bestseller they recently enjoyed. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Damon. I really like the point you make that it's not necessary to have this critical scene on the cover or to like create a collage of all of the elements that are important. I think that's something I ran into frequently with clients when I was doing self-publishing consulting, where if there was an important scene with a glass of whiskey and a gun and a fireplace, like that's what they wanted on the cover. And it was really hard to kind of get people to detach from this idea that they needed all these symbols there.
Yeah, I mean, it happens all the time, right? That's important to the author. I understand that. But the author's not selling this book to themselves, right? They're selling it to a reader who can choose between 100, choose from 100 other books. I feel like that's the key and always something that has to be remembered. And that's, I guess, what a good cover designer is there for, to help guide that direction.
Yeah. Okay, we have quite a number of questions and so many rabbit holes we can go down. So we'll see how many we can knock out here. So the first question, no surprise to me, is about AI. And if you could talk about using illustrations or covers with some sort of AI component. I think there may be two parts to this question we should address. One is designers who use AI and what questions you should ask. And I think you use some AI in your business, Damon. And then there's like a copyright question that comes into play. And what concerns should authors have?
Right. So AI, we use AI on some covers where with permission. So in our order form says, look, I believe that AI is useful, a very, very useful tool. And we kind of use it the same way we might use stock photos, right? So we don't have AI design the entire cover for us, but we might use it to create an image that we cannot find that exists as a stock photo. So for us, it's easier to find a stock photo that you can browse and you can look at all different kind of options, but sometimes it just doesn't work, right? Or you can't get what you need or whatever it might be. So in terms of AI use, we use it as a tool. On the other hand, many, many authors, I get it, don't like AI. And then in that case, we don't use AI, right? We just use the stock photos. Right? So it's not a thing for us in that sense. It's yeah, sure, we use it where we can. An issue with AI is a little bit similar to a badly designed cover, that when you're looking at it, when a reader's looking at a cover, they're not really looking at the cover, right? They're looking at the book. So they're going, is this a book I want to read? They're not going, oh, although maybe subconsciously they're going, the cover is attracting them. They're not going, oh, look what that person's wearing in the cover, or they're not examining the cover, right? They're looking for a book to read. So anything that kind of takes them out of that trying to find a book where they're so focused on the cover that the cover's not doing its job, right? And often AI generated covers look like AI generated covers. And then the feeling is, oh, this looks like this thing was AI generated, which is different, which is not this looks like a good book I want to read, if you know what I mean. So it's kind of the same if it's a cover that looks like AI is similar to a cover that looks like a stock photo, right? Where they're going, oh, this looks like a stock photo. Nobody should be thinking about how the cover was made or where the images come from. They should be going, oh, this looks like a good book that I want to read. So, so when authors use AI to design their own covers, and it's a good job, does it well and use it well, that's great because they're achieving what they want to achieve, right? They're getting a cover that works. The reader is not, if it's done well, is not thinking about this as an AI generated cover. They're just thinking, oh, that's a good book that I'd like to read. So that's the first point about AI. Using AI to create a cover in terms of copyright, well, so that depends on your question exactly. In terms of copyright, in terms of the fear that somebody else might use your cover because it was generated by AI, is that what the question's about? All right, so that can happen anyway, right? Because if we're not using AI, we're using stock photos. And those stock photos, for the most part, can just be purchased by somebody else and used to create the same cover. So with many things, it's not whether or not you're using a stock photo to create a cover and using somebody else's cover. It's what is somebody going to do about it, right? Are you going to fight against it? The thing with the traditional publishers and authors trying to make your cover look like other bestseller covers, right? You're already mimicking other covers. So whether you're using covers that were created with AI and then you're mimicking those covers, it's kind of the same thing. What are you going to do about it? What is the author going to do about it? Are you going to fight somebody that's doing it? Or it doesn't really make sense. If they're using AI to do it, then they can use AI to make their own cover. You know, I like, so the copyright thing is not something that, I don't know, it's not something that concerns us in that sense. If that's the question, is it about copying somebody else's cover.
Yeah, I think that's what the person's getting at. Although it's if Kate's on, you can clarify your question in the chat or elsewhere, and we can revisit it. But I think that's what the intention.
Okay, all right. Because I wasn't sure if it was about using copyrighted images
No, I think it's just
to okay.
I think it's pointing to the fact that generating things with AI doesn't offer you any copyright protection.
Yeah, although I think I remember seeing somewhere that you can, depending on how that's combined with other elements, that it's just those AI generated parts, right, that are
Right.
not copy. But
Correct.
that's exactly the same as using stock photos
Yes.
to create a gun.
Right. Excellent. Okay. So Helen is curious about the information form that was referenced. I think Jule, I can't remember who first brought this up, but Damon, I know that you have an intake form, and there are tools that designers use, as well as publishers actually, when they're collecting feedback from the author about their strong likes or dislikes. Like if you hate the cover or if you hate the color yellow, we'll try not to use that on, on your cover, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So tell us more about that and how authors should approach filling in that form.
So I guess more information is better than less information. So I mean, we want to get a feel for the book. Obviously, the genre super important. We want to get a feel for what it's about. We like to know other examples of covers that you like, because as much as we're trying to do what works for the genre, what works for your book, we also want to do what works for the author, right? That they like, and we want them to also like the cover that's going out there. It doesn't just have to fit the genre or to fit the market. So description, key elements. We're not reading the book, right? So we need to know key events and key elements that happen, not to necessarily put them on the cover, but as potential things to put on the cover. So I would say a description, key elements, other examples of covers that author likes, or the main aspects that we need. Also important, if there's a very specific target market, that's good. What I've actually found in doing the reviews, very useful information information for me is, who is your ideal reader, right? Who is the person that you're selling this book to? Because if you don't know who you're selling the book to, then how are you going to know how to sell it to?
Someone in the chat was wondering if you read the books before designing them, but I can certainly say that I don't know many designers who would do that, and I don't feel like it's necessary. Damon?
No. No, we don't read the book. And I mean, no, we don't read the book. It just wouldn't be possible. We get so many. But also the potential reader hasn't read your book before they're seeing the cover and choosing whether or not to buy it. So it's kind of weird way to sell it with the idea that we don't know what it is. Would we click on this? Right? We also want to put things out that we're proud of, that we think will work. So, I think that sort of slightly objective viewpoint helps with design of the cover.
So Sandy says the New York Times did a story last month about the trend for literary fiction, which I think we saw a little bit of already. Blaringly bright type in a sans serif font atop a painting, usually a few centuries old, but not always.
Yeah.
And the question is, given the long lead times in publishing, how does this happen? How do so many similar covers end up coming out in the same 12 to 18 months? And the second question, how do we know if this is actually leading to good sales?
I don't know. So, I mean, if those are what's coming from the traditional publishers, then I'm assuming that they have those numbers, because that's what's happening, right? That New York Times article, I don't think they'll have any self-published authors that are
No, no.
those exactly. So, right. So I don't know the answer to that. But yeah, those trends certainly happen. We get asked that now, right? We get briefed right now on covers to do exactly that. Take an old painting, put bright text in, from self-published authors.
Yeah.
So they've read the same article.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that I can adequately explain what's happening there, other than there is definitely a phenomenon where when one book breaks out and
Yeah.
does sell or hits the bestseller list, then everyone kind of follows because retailers and bookstores and they're saying there's this desire to have more of that success and to try and catch it again, but um, it doesn't always work as well the second time.
No,
Um,
but it's the same thing. Make it look like another bestseller that you already like. And we
yeah,
get that now with suspense books with a keyhole, the hand coming around the door,
yeah,
because of
yep,
Freedom McFadden's success.
right,
Many,
right,
we get many, many briefs to do that look.
right.
And it seems to work because it keeps happening.
Yeah. Sheila wonders if you have any opinion about individual authors having a branded look over many books, possibly even apart from a series.
Do I have an opinion? Not really. I mean, we do it sometimes, but I try. It depends on the author, I guess. It depends on how well established the author is, and it depends on the series, and it depends on the genre, because ultimately that cover doesn't need to stand alone. That book doesn't need to stand alone. It does need to work. If you forced to do something a certain way because of the author branding, that it hurts that individual cover or that series, then I wouldn't recommend it. But I mean, for the most part, yes, it's useful, but I
Mhm,
don't think it's essential.
mhm.
I think it comes into play more with nonfiction, to look
Yeah,
for that same author. And
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, something I've noticed, one of the authors that I follow pretty closely is Alan de Botton, and he's a UK author. And if you look at the covers of his UK books, and it's mostly nonfiction, there is definitely a branded look. But he's very well known there. And so I think people will just buy books that have his name on them. But if you go to the US editions of those same books, they're all over the place. It's much more driven, I think, by the US publisher's assessment of what appeals in that particular shelf or category, because he writes on multiple topics.
yeah,
And since he's not well known in the United States, I don't think they see any point in having a branded look.
yeah, potentially. I mean, we often do covers um, for different markets. But our, I guess, style is probably more suited to the US market. I mean, I've just noticed that is more likely to happen. That the UK market is quite different, I feel, from others. And well, we do German books as well. There's a lot of similarity with German books now. But yeah, so I guess yeah, it's good in some ways, in some aspects.
Can you put into words the differences in design or aesthetics between the US and the UK market?
I mean, I'm not an expert on the UK market because we don't do. I mean,
Because,
we
oh yeah,
do, but we don't do that many. But
yeah.
from my point of view, they're less contrasty, less
Mm,
colorful. Simpler. I guess
yeah.
simpler. Those are so. I mean, we do a lot of the covers for Dean Koontz's new books, right? But only for the US market. So I can't go now in New Zealand and buy that book that I
Mm,
designed the cover for. Um, but the one that's here is much, much simpler, right? It's a bright cover and a small image and a big name, whereas the ones for the US are very, very colorful, detailed, intricate. There's a lot
mm,
going on.
mm.
I mean, I guess that's sort of, I don't know if that explains it
Yeah.
really, but that does seem to be the difference.
Rachel is wondering, she's not sure if this is a question or a comment, but I think it's a question. Uh, she's found that with publicists, PR people, the ones responsible for getting coverage for a book, when they can't succeed or the book isn't selling, they like to blame the cover and they will push changing the cover. And so Rachel says this has happened twice, and she's had readers tell her that they preferred the original cover. Ugh. So she's just wondering, is there a way to test market covers before you end up in this kind of situation?
Well, I think the test is, it's got to be, it depends on how you test it, right? It's got to be, I think you got to poll people, right? I mean, that's what you can do. We sometimes use PickFu,
Mm,
PickFu as a polling
yeah,
service, but it's important that you get the question right,
yeah.
firstly, and secondly, that you're polling people that don't know your book or haven't read your book, because those are the people you're targeting, right? You're targeting people that haven't read your book yet, and don't know what your book's about necessarily. So when a reader says, well, I preferred your old cover, well, they might have some kind of feeling or connection when they read the book with an old cover, or after they've read the book, they look at the cover and go, oh, okay, that makes sense, whatever it might be now that I've read the book. But they have already read the book, right? They're not now being asked to buy the book. So it depends. I I would say poll readers or poll potential readers within your genre who haven't read the book yet. Changing the cover can make a difference. Don't trust people who say I preferred your old cover who've already read your book because they've biased, polling's useful.
Jewel, did you do any testing for your covers?
I did testing for the original Sweet Baby Lover, yes. And I've also tested business cards, which I remember making a decision where my favorite was not the one that people liked
Mm,
best, so I didn't choose
interesting.
that. Yeah.
The other
Um,
thing to consider is polling is what you're comparing your cover to, right? I mean, if you're submitting three covers, you say which one's the best one, but they're all not great, right?
mm,
Then
mhm.
you're not going to get the right answers.
Yeah. I know that it doesn't inspire joy in me to see people testing their covers in Facebook author groups. One,
Yeah,
because this isn't necessarily their readership. And I think you get a lot of confusing and conflicting advice that just you come out of it sometimes, I think, worse than when you entered. Um, so
yeah.
I,
Well, it's like asking ChatGPT to critique your cover, right? You could put the worst cover there, and it'll tell you it's amazing, right? So
yes, yes.
the self-publishing, sorry, the groups that everybody's trying to be helpful, right? And they're trying to see the best of everything, and they're all and everybody's in the same boat, right? Of wanting support and wanting positive feedback, and their own covers may also not be great, So then you're comparing it to sort of maybe a pool of covers that aren't as good as they could be. So I
Yeah.
think that feedback also is a bit biased.
Okay, we're about to hit on our time. I just want to end on a very practical note because we've had some questions about costs for hiring a designer, and I know that it there can be a very wide range. So, Jewel, maybe let's start with you and talk about the different prices you've paid over time for your covers, and then Damon will talk about what you charge and what you might expect from the wider design universe. Jewel?
Yeah. Okay. My first cover, I think, was $500, 400, 500. Um, my second two covers, I can't really separate the cover from the interior because it was in a complete illustration package. And then my last cover was with Damon's Eye, and I think it was 600 or some six or somewhere in there, 6, 7. And I view it as an investment in my book. If I'm going to invest my time, I'm going to invest my money in making sure the cover serves my book. And so I have a software program called YNAB. You need a budget, but one of the things I can budget for is my cover. Why wouldn't I give my cover that? As much as I think I'm pretty good at design, I'm not a cover designer. So
Damon?
Yeah, I've actually got, um, maybe I'll be able to share it.
Mm,
I will just do that. I've got an article that I wrote, which I believe are the best cover designers for self-published authors, right? And the reason being all kinds of reasons, right? They get it, right? They understand um, what works for the market. It's a bit like that cover you put there with the two brains, right? And the other one, where that's not a bad cover, but it's not the right cover, right? So, in other words, it's not a bad design. It's like it's a good, well-designed piece of art, but it's not right for a book cover, and or for a commercial book cover in the genre. So I've got this article. I'm just trying to find. I've got another screen over here, which is what I'm looking at. Which I'll share the link I could get to. But basically, it's 5 cover designers that I think would work for. I'm gonna have to do it afterwards. Oh, here it is. Sorry. They've all got different prices, but within that range, kind of that Jule said, is a reasonable price to pay. You can go more than that. There are cheaper options than that. Really, you've just got to do what works for your genre. Look at their portfolios. But I would say in the region of $500 or $600. We have more expensive packages, right, than that, which involve more options, more services. We also have a cheaper package than that, which just means fewer options, fewer rounds of changes. But that kind of price range is fine. I have found this now, so I'm just going to put chat.
Terrific. Yeah.
So any of those, I think we're good. Jule mentioned book fly design on there, on her in her presentation. They're amazing. Very, very good. Very, very good. They're on that list. But there's a few others there as well.
Great. Thank you. I'll add that to the show notes as well for people. Okay.
Okay. Great.
We are at the end of time. This was fantastic. Thank you so much, Damon and Jule, for sharing insights into your process and how you look at covers. I'll include the links and resources that we shared, including the slides from Jule. And I hope to see you in another session soon. The next one is coming in late September, and it's about digital accessibility for ebooks. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Damon and Jule, and I hope to see you again soon.
Great. Thanks very much, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.